I'm sorry. Were you waiting for me this time? Well, I'm always waiting for you, so I guess it's your turn to wait for me. Well, I'm glad you weren't waiting that long. Should we get started? Magic Bites, of course, by Ilona Andrews. Okay. Good. I'm glad you agree. Bono's pretty face, his hair, and his jacket made sure he was noticed. Women enjoyed his company. He enjoyed them too, but his focus was on quantity. I'd never seen him with the same woman twice. Once in a while, someone tried to kick his ass and left a few smears of their blood on the floor and furniture. Anyone who spent his formative years tending to a stable of vampires proved a hard person to fight. I could have gone straight to the source and just asked Gastic about his vampire. Trouble was, confronting Gastic meant I'd have to physically walk into the casino where the people had their HQ. Walking into the casino meant I'd have to meet Nataraja, the people's grand poobah, and the city and Gastic's boss and supervisor. Nataraja was the worst kind of worm, but he had an uncanny sensitivity to magic. My guess was he wasn't quite sure what he felt when I was around, but he wanted very much to find out. Every time we met, our conversation degenerated into him trying to force me into a show of power that I couldn't afford. Especially not now with the 4 new words of power rattling in my head. I'd have to go to the casino eventually, but for now, squeezing Gastic's journeyman would suffice. It was almost 11 p.m. when I made it to Andriano's. Bono rarely showed up before dark, and I had to use the time to hop the ley line back into my place and bring back Betsy, my beat-up old Subaru. It looked like I wouldn't be stuck in the city for a while. Since the magic would fall, the way it always did, I'd eventually need a car that worked during tech. It cost me $50 to have Betsy towed to Greg's place. I was in the wrong business. I entered Andriano's. The bar stretched the length of the room, guarded by a row of tall stools. A couple of patrons stared into their drinks on the far end. A blonde with her war paint on sipped something fruity from a margarita glass. Through the arched doorway I could see the second room, crowded with red privacy booths, which Andriano must have pilfered from some fast food joint. The barkeep, long of limb and dark-haired, nodded at me. Lean and phlegmatic with a narrow, intelligent face, he looked more like a campus intellectual than a bartender. His name was Sergio, and he knew how big of a lime slice to put into a Corona, which made him a worthwhile man to know. I passed him 2 20s. Sergio bent an eyebrow at me. What's for? In case anything gets broken, Bono and I are going to chat a bit. Is he here? Sergio nodded toward the room with booths and shrugged, palming the 20s. Stay away from the windows, he said. Too expensive for you. The back room was dimly lit with fey lanterns. Bono preferred a corner booth, the farthest from the door. I stood for a moment surveying the scene and caught sight of his spiky black hair. I marched toward the booth with flags out and guns ready. Bono had company, judging by the mystical, "Hey baby, I'm a student of magic," smile that stretched his lips. He had a female company. No matter. He paused his wooing to glance around the room and noticed me. He must have seen something he did not like because a smile slid off his face. He sat straighter. I reached back. My fingers grasped Slayer's hilt and withdrew it in a smooth, fluid motion. Bono's hand dropped under the table, groping for a gun. He carried a 9mm Colt in his jacket pocket. I crashed to a halt. A thin redhead in a strapless short dress sat opposite Bono. I put my saber on the table. Bono stank of vampires, and the saber fluoresced weakly as silver of moonlight against the dark wood. The redhead's eyes went wide. Bono's face relaxed a bit, but his gaze never left mine. "Hey, Bono," I said. "Nice to see you. Fuck any corpses lately?" Last hope for a relaxing evening bled from his face. "Not any you care about." Redhead scrambled out of the booth and fled, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Bono threw a wistful look after her retreating backside and turned to me. "You scared her. Not nice, Kate." "No." "You should read it, Kate. You should read about the Upiri." I traced Larry's blade with my finger. It stung a little as the magic discharge touched my skin. "I want to know about the diviner's death. I want to know why one of Gastic's bloodsuckers was at the scene. I want to know who was piloting it and what they saw. I want to know what tore his head off and whatever else you'll find necessary to add." Bono showed me his teeth. "Feeling a bit on edge today, are you?" My hand closed about the hilt. "You have no idea." He leaned back. "Go ahead," he said. "Make a play." "I'll ass fuck you with that lightsaber." I grinned at him. "You can't take me, Bono. Go ahead and try. You telegraph your punches, you drop your left shoulder, and your gun isn't worth piss with magic up, so come on. Show me what you got." Saw his eyes and knew my grin had turned into a hungry grimace. I really need to hurt something. It'll make me feel good. I was almost laughing, having a hard time containing myself. "Give me a reason. Come on, Bono. Just give me a fucking reason." Magic built around me, drawn from the environment by the emanations from my blood. If magic had color, I would be sitting in a whirlpool of red. Slayer flared bright silver, feeding off my anger. It wanted to slice into warm flesh, and I was about to let it. Bono blinked. He sensed the magic influx and sucked the air into his lungs in a sharp breath. "You're crazy." "Very." His face went slack, and I knew he had stepped away from the cliff. The fight would not happen today. Bono leaned forward. "What if I told you we'd have no involvement with the diviner's death, and even if we did, we don't have to speak to you?" That proverbial "we." I chewed on it for a little while, and said, "In that case, I'll get up and walk over to the bar where I'll take 2 phone calls. First, I'll call the night protector, for whom I now work, and tell him that a vampire belonging to Gastek was involved in his diviner's murder. I'll tell him that an effort was made to conceal its brand, which is illegal, and that Gastek's journeyman declined to discuss the matter with me and threatened my life. Then I'll call Gastek and inform him that I know the reason why the world had just started crashing down around his ears, and I'll explain to him that the reason is you." He stared at me. "I thought we were on good terms." We nod to each other across the room. "We don't bother each other. I shared my research with you." I shrugged. "You won't do this to me," he said with great surety. "You know what Gastek would do to me? You're a nice person." Just exactly in my track record gives you the idea that I'm a nice person. He had no answer and shook his head. "Why me?" "Why not? Give me what I want and I'll go away, or I'll hurt you one way or another." Bono was in the corner, no way to go but outside the ring. "They're called shadows," he said, his handsome face marked with resignation. "Vampires with concealed brands. Gastek isn't the only one using them, but he uses his a lot, if you catch my drift." "What was that particular one doing?" "Tailing the diviner. I don't know why." "Who was piloting it?" Bono hesitated. "Merkowitz." "What did he see?" Bono spread his hands. "Your guess is as good as mine. Do you know what happens to a navigator when the vamp he's piloting dies?" I had a general idea, but more info never hurt. Enlighten me. "Unless you guard yourself, you'll suffer death shock, meaning you think it's your head being torn off, which leaves your brain very confused. Add it to the explosion of shit the diviner threw around and whatever magic the attacker emitted, and you'll get Merkowitz. I never liked the asshole, I have to admit, he makes a fine vegetable. My heart sank. Non-responsive? About as responsive as a brick wall. How long will he be like this? They're working on him now, but when he'll come out, nobody knows. It's hard work convincing someone that he isn't dead when his own mind has decided otherwise. Do the people have any idea who might have enough juice to beat a diviner and a vampire to a pulp? Bono looked past me at the wall. I need a name, I said. Corwin, you didn't hear it from me. He rose in a fluid motion and left. I waited a few minutes, went to the bar and drank a cold Corona with a wedge of lime in it. I had frightened Bono. A small part of me felt bad about it. The larger part reminded me that the piloted vampires for a living and kicked his opponents when they decided to stay down. Greg's face came to mind. I took a big swig of Corona. I felt defeated and tired. What a long day. I had hoped for more than Bono had given me. Still, I had a name. And I had Greg's database. Which, I could reference it. The day was not a total waste. Darkness cloaked the stairway of Greg's apartment building. Not a single lamp illuminated the concrete steps. When I came to the first landing, I saw why the electric bulbs had exploded. It happened once in a while, during a hard fluctuation in places where the magic hit the hardest. The fluorescent fey lamps usually did the job just fine. They ran by the converting environmental magic to weak bluish light, but tonight they were dark too. The fluctuation must have been too strong and the lamp converters had overheated and burned out. I felt odd going back to Greg's place. Not exactly ill at ease, but not happy to be there either. Unfortunately, I had no choice. I'd have to spend some time in this rotten city, and I needed a base. Greg's apartment was perfect. Its wards were keyed to me, and Greg had maintained a fair collection of basic herbs, reference books, and other useful things. His arsenal was decent, but he leaned toward bludgeoning arms, which I preferred swords. Maces and hammers required too much strength. I was strong for a woman, but I harbored no illusions. In a contest of strength, a man of my size and my training would pummel me into the ground. Lucky for me, very few men had my training. I climbed the dark stairs, fantasizing about food and a shower. The guarding the apartment's door clutched at my hand and opened in a pulse of blue. I entered, kicked off my shoes, and went into the kitchen. The upside of having a magic sword was that its secretions liquefied the undead flesh. On the downside, the blade had to be fed at least once a month, or it would become too brittle and break. I wonder if there's a specific thing it has to be fed. I slid a 4-foot-long fish tank from the bottom cabinet and found the bag of feed I've kept at Greg's apartment for emergency purposes. Grayish-brown, the feed resembled coarse wheat flour. Most of it was actually wheat flour. That and metal shavings, copper, iron, and silver, and seashells ground to the fine dust, together with bone meal and chalk. I filled the tank with water, added a cup of feed, and stirred the mixture with a long wooden spoon until the solution became cloudy and none of the feed remained stuck to the bottom. That done, I dropped the saber into it and washed my hands. The little ruby light on the answering machine was blinking. It shouldn't have, since the magic was in full swing. Magic was a funny thing. Sometimes ones worked, and sometimes they failed. I settled into my chair and pushed the button in the answering machine. Anna's anxiety-laced voice filled the room. "Kate, it's me!" I sat up straighter. Anna didn't get anxious. Perhaps it was Greg's death. Their divorce was 10 years old, but she still must have felt something for him. "Listen very carefully while I remember." Exhaustion crept into her voice, and I realized she was fresh from a vision. The fact that she knew I would be in Greg's apartment was so mundane to her, she didn't bother to comment on it. Sometimes being a clairvoyant has its issues. "Woods," Anna's voice said. "Very green, very healthy, late spring or early summer. The air smells of moisture. There are tall wooden idols set under some of the trees. They are old. Time has smoothed the edges of the carvings. The idols shift and change shape. One looks like an old man, but also a bear with horns holding something. A saucer of water, maybe. Another old man stands on a fish. I think he holds a wheel in his hand. A man with 3 faces, his hands covered, sitting deep in a shadow. I can barely see him. The first was Velez. The third was Triglav, Slavic pantheon. I have to look up the second one. A man stands before them, surrounded by a brood of his children. They are very wrong. They do not fit, neither human nor animal, neither living nor dead. Behind him stand his servants. They smell of undeath. Anna took a deep breath. The man is masturbating to the right. Something is shimmering in and out of existence. A child, maybe to the left, is sitting cross-legged on the grass and eating a corpse. Lovely. I know Greg's dead, she said. And I know you're looking for the murderer. You must drop it, Kate. I know you'll ignore me, but I have to warn you, this isn't good. Kate, it's not good at all. I awoke 8 hours later, tired and plagued by a migraine. I meant to call Anna, but instead I somehow had fallen into bed and my body turned off my brain for the entire night. By the way, this is chapter 3. The phone no longer worked. I sat on the bed and stared at it. So far I had some data for a hair, but not the actual specimen. I had some lines that may or may not be the result of a M-reader malfunction, and I had a name of some nocturnal character given to me under duress by a people journeyman. He'd pretty much do anything to get me off his back. On top of it, I had what was probably a feline hair on a dead vampire, which set the pack and people on a collision course. I pictured 2 colossi running at each other across the city, like monstrosities from an antique horror movie, and myself, and that in the middle. It would be a bloodbath, which was most of the city when it survived, so the trick wasn't to survive it, but to keep it from happening. In my daydream, the net kicked one of the colossus in the groin and hit the other with a vicious uppercut. I tried the phone again. It still didn't work. I cursed and went to dress. An hour later, I slipped into Greg's office. Nobody challenged me. Nobody glared and asked me why the hell the case was not solved or why it was arriving so late. The lack of drama was very disappointing. I sifted through Greg's data. The cabinets contained no files marked Corwin, but in the last cabinet I found a stack of folders marked with a question mark. So I went through them on a faint hope that I'd find something. Anything. Otherwise, I'd be reduced to grabbing people on the street and screaming, "Do you know Corwin? Where is he?" The files secured Greg's notes, written in his particular code. I frowned as I scanned one indecipherable entry after another. Glot bag, B11 through 7. B11 had to be the bullets. I could be Argentinium silver. What the hell did glot mean? My hopes dimmed as I flipped through the pages after pages, and when I came across it, my brain almost did not register it. On a single page there was a scratchy Corwin, and next to it were 2 drawings. One was a very clumsy rendition of a glove with sharp blades protruding from its knuckles. The other was some sort of bizarre doodle against a dark semicircle. I stared at the doodle. It meant nothing to me. The phone rang. I looked at it. It rang again. I wondered if I should answer. The intercom came to life, and Maxine's voice said, "You should, dear. It's for you." How does she know? I picked up the phone. "Yes." "Hello, sunshine," said Jim's voice. "I'm kind of busy." I turned the file aside and examined the doodle. Still nothing. "No shit," he said. "Yeah, no gigs for me. That's not why I'm calling." I frowned at the phone and turned the file upside down. "I'm all ears." "Someone wants to meet you," he said. "Tell him to get in line," I mumbled. The doodle almost looked like something. "I'm not joking." "You never joke because you're too damn busy proving that you're a badass. Come on, black leather cloak? In mid-spring Atlanta? Besides, I don't have the time to meet anybody." Jim's voice dropped low and spoke each word very distinctly. "Think very carefully. Do you really want me to tell the man no?" Something about the way he said "the man" stopped me. I sat still and thought very hard about what kind of man would inspire Jim to use that voice. "What did I do to warrant the Beast Lord's attention?" I asked dryly. You're sitting in the diviner's office, aren't you? Touché. The Beast Lord was the Pack King, the lord of the shape-changers, and he ruled his brethren with an iron fist. Few ever saw him, and the mention of his title was enough to make a lot of shape-changers shut up. In other words, he was precisely the kind of fellow my father and Greg had warned me to avoid. I ground my teeth, thinking of a way to weasel out of it. I would have to go and see the people sooner or later to find out about the vampire, but so far, nothing necessitated my walking to the Pack's lair. Your safety is guaranteed, Jim said. I'll be there. Your safety is guaranteed, Jim said. I'll be there. That's not the reason, I murmured. There had to be a way to dodge this invitation. I glared at the stubborn noodle. Look, Jim said, making an obvious attempt to sound reasonable. Tell him I'll meet him tonight someplace private, I said. I'll answer his questions, and if he answers mine. Agreed. 11 o'clock, corner of Unicorn and 13th. He hung up. I tapped the desk with my fingers. I finally made sense of the doodle. The head of the howling wolf silhouetted against the semicircle of the moon. The sign of the Pack, Corwin belonged to the Pack. There was a small matter of Maxine to attend to. I concentrated and whispered so quietly I couldn't hear myself. True communicators could focus enough to broadcast their thoughts without vocalization, but I still had to move my lips like a doofus. Maxine? Yes, dear, Maxine's voice said in my head. Were there any other calls to me? No. Thank you. You're welcome. I put the file back into its place and walked out of the office. Maxine was the telepath. A strong one. From now on, there would be no thinking done in the office. I left quickly, almost breaking into a run on the stairs. The idea of someone digging my head took some getting used to. I went back to the apartment. I sat on the floor, leaned against the door, and took a deep breath. All my life I was taught to stay out of the way of the powerful. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't show off. Guard your blood because it will betray you. If you bleed, wipe it clean and burn the rag. Burn the bandages if someone manages to tame some of your blood. Kill him and destroy the sample. At first it was a matter of survival. Later it became a matter of vengeance. Meeting the Beast Lord meant plunging headfirst into the supernatural politics of Atlanta. He was one of the heavyweights I could choose not to meet the Beast Lord. All I had to do was walk away. It would be easy. A vision of me squatting over a human corpse, stuffing shreds of limp meat into my mouth, flashed before my eyes. The apartment was silent. It felt like Greg. It was suffused with the life force, with everything that made him what he was. He was like my father, direct, unbending, doing his own thing, and never worrying about how the world would look upon him. I couldn't let it go. I would find whoever killed him, and punish them. If not for Greg, then for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the eye. Do you think she'll find her killer? Let me get closer to you. What do you think will happen? I guess we'll be finding out, huh? When life backs you into a corner and offers you no escape, when your friends, your lover, and your family abandon you, when you're at the end of your rope, give anything to make your problems go away. Well, panicked, alone, and losing your mind, you'd give anything to make your problems go away. Then desperate and eager, you'll come to Unicorn Lane, seeking any price. Unicorn Lane will take you in, shroud you in its power, fix your problems, and exact its price. And then you will learn what anything really means. Every city has one of those neighborhoods. Dangerous, sinister, so treacherous that even the criminals who prey on the other criminals shun them. Unicorn Lane was such a place, 30 city blocks long and 8 blocks deep. It cut through what used to be Midtown like a dagger. Half-crumpled skyscrapers stood there, mute, witness to the past technology. The husks of GLG Grand, Promenade 2, and One Atlantic Center gnawed down to the bones by magic. Rubble choked the streets and sewage overflowed from the busted pipes and foul-smelling streams. Magic pulled there, lingering even in the strongest of tech waves, and hideous things that shun the light found refuge there, among the dark carcasses of gutted high-rises. Lunatic mages, vicious, perverted loops, who feared death at the hand of the unforgiving pack. Satanists and rogue necromancers all ran to the unicorn, for if they could make it there and survive, no lawman on this earth would force them out. Unicorn Lane held on to its own. Hell of a place for a rendezvous. I drove up to 14th, parked Carmelian in a secluded alley, and walked the 2 remaining city blocks. Ahead, a stone wall had crumbled, a pitiful attempt of some fool on the city council to contain Unicorn Lane. I climbed over the wreckage. A large block of concrete barred my way. It looked slick, almost slimy, and I leaped over it. Here, even the moonlight snapped and growled like a rabid dog, and magic bit without warning. 5 minutes into the unicorn, a sign on the side of an abandoned house announced I had reached my destination. Corner of 13th and Unicorn in front of me, an old apartment complex stared at the street with empty windows. To the right, a tangled mess of concrete and steel framework marked a collapsed office building. The debris blocked the street, burying the pavement beneath the rubble. The street was open on the left, but shrouded in darkness. I stood very still, waiting, listening. The moonlight spilled into the ruins. Thick, inky darkness pulled into the alcoves and burrows and stretched forth, mingling with the light, spawning half-shadows and blurring the lines between real and illusory. The eerie landscape appeared false, as if the ruined buildings had vanished, leaving behind treacherous shadows of their former selves. Ahead in the depths of the Unicorn Lane, something howled, giving voice to a tortured soul. My heart skipped a beat. Someone or something watched me from the darkness. I felt their stare press upon me like a physical burden. Moments dragged by with minutes in tow. After a while, I glanced at my watch. It had stopped. Somewhere in the darkness, the beast lord prowled. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know the species of his beast. Few people outside of the pack claimed to have met him, and nobody seemed willing to discuss the experience. The only thing certain about him was the power. By the latest count, he commanded a force of 337 shape-changers in Atlanta alone. He wasn't in charge because he was the smartest or the most popular. He ruled because of the 337. He was unquestionably the strongest. He was in charge by the right of the might that is, he had yet to meet anyone who could kick his ass. Among the shape-changers, wolves are the most numerous. Then came the foxes, the jackals, the rats, and then the hyenas and the smaller felines, lynxes, bobcats, and cheetahs. There were exotic forms too. There were buffaloes and were serpents, but the buffaloes formed their own herd in the Midwest, and the serpents were solitary. All of the beast forms are larger than their natural counterparts. An average shape-changer in a wolf form came close to 220 pounds, while the natural gray wolf weighed 100 pounds less. From a biological point of view, the transformation of a 170-pound human into a 220-pound animal made no sense. But then when it came to shape-shifting, the fluctuating mass was at least of the anomalies. Magic could not be measured and explained in scientific terms, for magic grew through the destroying the very natural principles that made science as people knew it possible. Another howl ruptured the quiet, still too far away to be a threat. The beast lord, the leader, the alpha male, had to enforce his position as much by will as by physical force. He would have to answer any challenges to his rule, so it was unlikely that he turned into a wolf. A wolf would have a little chance against a cat. Wolves hunted in a pack, bleeding their victim and running them into exhaustion, while cats were solitary killing machines, designed to murder swiftly and with deadly precision. No, the beast lord would have to be a cat, a jaguar or a leopard, perhaps a tiger, although all known cases of war tigers occurred in Asia and could be counted without involving toes. I had heard a rumor of the Kodiak of Atlanta, a legend of an enormous battle-scarred bear roaming the streets in search of pack criminals. The pack, like any social organization, had its lawbreakers. The Kodiak was their executioner, Perhaps His Majesty turned into a bear. Damn, I should have brought some honey. My left leg was tiring. I shifted from foot to foot. A low, warning growl froze me in mid-move. It came from the dark, gaping hole in the building across the street and rolled through the ruins, awakening ancient memories of a time when humans are pathetic, hairless creatures, cowering by the weak flame of the first fire and scanning the night with frightened eyes where it held monstrous, hungry killers. My subconscious screamed in panic. I held it in, checked and cracked my neck, slowly one side then another. A lean shadow flickered in the corner of my eye on the left, and above me a graceful jaguar stretched on the jetting block of concrete. An elegant statue encased in the liquid metal of moonlight. Homo Panthera onca, the killer who takes its prey in a single bound. Hello, Jim. Jaguar looked at me with amber eyes, feline lips stretched in a startlingly human smirk. He could laugh if he wanted. He didn't know what was at stake. Jim turned his head and began washing his paw. My saber firmly in hand, I marched across the street and stepped through the opening. The darkness swallowed me whole. The lingering, musky scent of a cat hit me. So, not a bear after all. Where was he? I scanned the building, peering into the gloom, moonlight filtering through the gaps in the walls, creating a mirage of twilight and complete darkness. I knew he was watching me, enjoying himself. I think we should stop there. We will have to continue this, won't we? What do you think so far? Do you think she's going to have to fight the Beast Lord? Do you think he will be providing her assistance? Telling her what he knows? Do you think maybe he's behind it all? We shall see, we shall see.